All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise About Justice Movement, the podcast. By now, you know who I am, so I'm not going to introduce myself again. But I am excited to welcome this candidate running in Florida, Yin. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much. Great to be here.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. And let's dive right in.
All right.
So, you have a story, and there's a reason for why you're running for office, and being progressive is thrown around a lot, right? What does it mean? What's your story and what led you to running for office? Because you also ran briefly before,
Mhm.
but why is it important for progressive voices to run for office now? And what's your story?
Yeah. So, I did run in 2024 and I got in really late, just 3 months before the election. Really, I never ever thought I would be doing this. I always tell everyone I did not even run for student council when I was in school. But so at the time, I had just started a nonprofit to do voter outreach to rural, working class, youth communities that we really felt like were being ignored in our area. And we had reached out to the local Democratic Party, and they were just not interested. They said we can just run up the numbers in our municipal areas. It's a waste of time reaching out to these communities. And so my friends and I said, well, you know what, we can do this ourselves. And so we were doing that work. We just started that, and I got a call out of the blue that so the Democratic Party was looking for a candidate to run. Um, Neil Dunn, the incumbent, was going to go unopposed unless, so there was a candidate who had filed and she had to drop out. And it was already past the filing deadline. And so if they couldn't find a replacement, there was just not going to be a Democrat on the ballot. And after I thought about it for a while, um, because it was 3 months and we do have a red district. They told me up front, they were like, look, the chances of you winning are pretty much zero. Um, but it was I was already doing that work, and it was going to give me a bigger platform to do it and reach out to more people. Um, but I was like, I will run, but even though it might be impossible, I'm going to do the best job that I can. I'm going to run a real campaign, um, as well as I can. And as I was going, I was like, well, I am going to go out to these rural areas. People were telling me, just, you only have 3 months, stay in the city. Um, but I did both. And really, as I was going out into those rural areas, I kept hearing from people that they never had any candidates talk to them. And it had been years since anyone reached out to them at all. And people really just started getting excited just to have someone listen to them. And so when it was all over, it was so fast. I really felt like we had just started something. And especially with Trump getting reelected, which I was very upset about. I wanted some way to fight back, and it felt like this was the perfect way to um, just continue that work. I wanted to see how far we could go and just try to build up infrastructure. I mean, that was really my whole purpose in running again. I wasn't really thinking of that things were going to change, and now I really do feel like we do have a chance of flipping this. But I mean, I feel like no matter what, just continuing that work and just building the infrastructure, win or lose, it is meaningful work. And I
Ab-
mean, and even yeah, that is
yeah,
so.
yeah, absolutely. And speaking of like meaningful work, it's also addressing the needs of your constituents and your
Absolutely.
community. And I feel that a lot of elected officials, all the way up and down, at different levels, are not listening to those needs of their constituents. They're selling out to corporations. They're selling out to big money in politics, which we'll dive into here in just a little bit. Because you talk about integrity, honesty, accountability, and transparency. Those are obviously key, and literally just common sense, Ian. I mean,
Right.
seriously, it's literally just common sense. But your
Right.
platform is a common sense platform because this is what every candidate should be focusing on. I mean, it's clear as day that people are just fed up with both parties,
Yeah.
and it's not meeting the current moment. Speaking of not meeting the current moment, you know, what does affordability look like? And you have a lot on your platform about this. What does affordability look like, or the lack thereof, in your district? Thinking about, inflation, thinking about, the economy. It all ties into this. And money in politics also ties into this because this is a policy choice and it's a systemic failure. But what does affordability look like, or the lack thereof, in your district? And I know a big thing right now is like the AI data centers contributing to the rising cost, the water, the electricity bills, etc. But essentially, what's working and what's not working?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I'm in a district where 49% of the people are below that Alice threshold, where they are working and still not able to afford all their bills. And so many people are struggling, both in the municipal areas, like in Tallahassee, we have three of the poorest zip codes in Florida. And in our rural areas, we have some of the poorest counties in Florida. And so there, that is really one of the most important issues in this district. And what I want to do is, there are a lot of different ways to combat that, trying to bring in better jobs. Um, so we do have, this is also a very storm prone area. We have one county that was hit by three different storms over the course of a year. And, and we had a lot of timber industry that was completely wiped out. Um, there are oyster industries and one of our counties that has also suffered. I mean, there are just so many things, and so trying to bring in new new industries, new jobs that are going to be more resilient, um, and also just lowering the cost of living. Housing has become unaffordable here. And of course, healthcare is an issue all across the country. But I mean, in Florida, we have an even higher number of people who depend on the ACA for their medical insurance. So it's just a lot of different areas that we need to tackle.
Sorry, technical difficulties there for a second. My finger, I was tapping the unmute button and it was not working. Um, it's been nothing but technical difficulties today. Um, a real big concern
Mhm.
is price gouging.
Yeah.
And especially during times of crisis and disasters. I
Hmm.
know that this is something that hits Florida really extremely hard, is that predatory price gouging. The
Yeah.
cost of like bottled water, the cost of,
Mhm.
gas, the cost of just food, the cost of like childcare, it's all this just trickle down issues that, and it's a policy choice. It's a policy failure. And thinking about price gouging, but especially during those times of distress and disasters. I mean, last night we saw very traumatic tornadoes hit the Oklahoma area. I don't know if you saw that, but it's all across social media, and it's been upgraded to an EF4 tornado that
Mhm.
ripped through a rural area in Enid, I think it's Enid or Enid, Oklahoma. But thinking about that price gouging, I want to kind of talk about this just for a second.
Mhm.
You said that you mentioned that, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Oh, it doesn't start out that way. But I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this that it makes the most sense. And but yeah, I mean, just talk about that price gouging during disasters. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a very big thing that happens. A lot of corporations, they profit off of people struggling. They
Absolutely.
do, and that's a really big issue. So I'd love for you to dive into that and talk specifically about that part.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That is a huge issue here. So yeah, things like water, gasoline, all of those storm supplies, the prices surge right before the storm and after the storm. And we always hear a lot about the AG, oh, let us know if you see any price gouging and we'll go and, we'll take care of it. And, but it seems like there's never enough of that. And, there are just people who suffer. And it takes so much longer for these prices to come back down afterwards, much longer than necessary. Um, so, so yeah, I mean, it's a huge issue.
And it's an issue all across the country. I grew up kind of like around like the Joplin, Missouri tornado as well. I'm from Missouri, but I'm from the Kansas City area, and it devastated the entire community. And then Hurricane Katrina, like thinking about all of these natural disasters and the predatory price gouging, we were feeling it even here. I don't have to worry, I don't really have to deal with like tsunamis or like hurricanes or anything like that. But I live literally in the area that is known as Tornado Valley. And tornadoes are very destructive. And there's a lot of issues that come along with that. But also, flooding is a really big thing too. But thinking about affordable childcare, thinking
Mhm.
about paid rental and family leave, these are these lead people into poverty because it's not affordable at all. Some people have to quit their jobs, which
Mhm.
obviously if you quit your job, then your bills are not being paid. If your bills are not being paid, you wind up sometimes unhoused. And whenever we want to criminalize people being unhoused, that's not the solution to that. The solution is to make things more affordable for your working class, like the poor and the working class people, because it's a common fact that if people have what they need, they thrive and then they're happy. And then they live in that American dream that everybody talks about that was distilled in our minds whenever we were going through school and about the big American dream, that white picket fence. It's 2026 and I haven't seen it yet. That I was
Right,
that I was promised. And like
right.
all of us were taught that.
Hmm.
What does that American dream look like in a capitalist, like trickle down economic system that literally does not work, right?
Yeah.
It does not work. Kind of going off on a tangent here, but I know you understand, and you also have a background of practicing law,
Hmm.
as an ethics lawyer. What led you to practicing law? What did you experience during your time? Are you still actively practicing?
So right now, I am not, I'm just campaigning. It is,
Yes.
yeah,
That's a
it was
full-time
too,
job in
yes,
itself.
it is. When I first started, I thought I could at least try to do some legal work on the side. Um, that lasted a couple of months, and I was like, it was not effective. I was, just not able to handle both things well. I mean, I spend so much time on the campaign now that like I barely have time to eat or sleep sometimes. So,
Yes,
um,
understandable.
yeah, but Yeah, so I I didn't always want to be a lawyer. I grew up actually wanting to be a doctor. I really wanted to do something that I thought could help people. Um, Once I got to college, I realized that really was not for me. And so I switched courses, went through a few different things and finally landed on, I decided to go to law school and um, I really wanted to go into areas where I could help people. Um, I tried to do just general civil litigation for a while. Um, and I actually was on the defense side. I hated it. So I worked for the Guardian ad litem program after that, and that really just it opened my eyes to so many things. I mean, not just, so I was fighting for abused and neglected children, um, but also just, not just what these children were going through, just what their families were going through and what led them to get into some of these situations. Um, and just realizing how unfair the system was and how little help families get sometimes. Um, and this is coming from, I grew up, and my parents were refugees, and we grew up very poor. Um, but this, sometimes the things that I would see, were just on a whole different level. And so so yeah, but it also was just very draining. And so after I left there, it was just so much sometimes to handle. And so then I went to go work for the Florida Bar as an ethics lawyer, and there just trying to make sure that um, lawyers were following the rules. So a different kind of service. And that really has informed just my view of accountability as well. So yeah.
Speaking of the Florida bar,
Hmm.
and speaking of lawyers doing what they're supposed to do, we saw the lack of transparency in the Epstein files.
Yeah.
Pamela Bondi.
Yes.
Whenever people reached out to the Florida bar, because she served as the attorney general from 2011 to 2019 during Jeffrey Epstein. That wasn't when he was mainly focused on like trafficking and sexually abusing children and women, but was still complicit in like the whole cover up and is still complicit. She defied a subpoena. And from your like legal background and from like what you know of and what you've seen working with children, working with, sexually abused children and going through these, navigating these systems, because it's very obvious these systems were not set up for people like you. It's very obvious. It wasn't set up for survivors. I'm a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence and gun violence myself. Um, I have my own experiences and I've had my own issues with police and with the criminal justice, juvenile justice system. I was also on probation for 5.5 years for something that I did not do from the age of 13 until 18. Um, Being a smart ass teenager, and I'll be the first to say it, it was very, very rough being thrown into a system that I never wanted to be a part of. And luckily, my record was expunged, after I turned 18. I completed community service, did everything I was supposed to do, and even did like some like anger management, which didn't work. But it did kind of open my eyes a little bit to what these systems are actually looking like and what these systems are actually doing. And I'm thinking about my black and brown siblings. It's like even more amplified and it's even more rooted in like systemic racism and systemic failures. But thinking about the Epstein files and thinking about I saw most recently that there is a growing number of Republican senators and Republican representatives, or I think it's just Republican senators that are looking more and more at Ghislaine Maxwell being released and supporting the release of
Mm.
Ghislaine Maxwell. That's deeply concerning.
Yeah,
Deeply concerning. She was already moved from like this
yeah,
maximum security style to this like fancy like Mar-a-Lago style. See what I did there, but kind of like kind of like that. But what are your thoughts about the Epstein files? And what
yeah.
are your
Oh,
have you read any of these files? Have you seen any of this? Like my stomach instantly churned
yeah,
reading some of these emails, looking at some of these images. It's deeply traumatizing.
yeah,
But what are your thoughts around this, and how do we hold them accountable? How do we
yeah,
hold? And I'm the first one to say, like, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. If you're in those files or had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein, investigation, prosecution, throw away the freaking key, right?
yeah,
I don't care what party you belong to. Like,
yeah.
it does not matter. But what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it is infuriating. You know, I had seen a statistic somewhere or someone, where they said that if you stacked all of the files on top of each other, that it would be as tall as the Eiffel Tower, you know, and
Yeah,
millions of documents. We have so much, and yet not a single arrest, not a single charge. Um, I mean, I prosecutors go after people for with so much less every single day, you cannot tell me that there is not enough there. And I mean, I guess the whole reason why, they're redacting or they're releasing some of the stuff is to show the public, oh yeah, there's not enough there. And we are seeing there's absolutely so much horrendous stuff in there. Um, you know, why are we not um, doing more investigation into some of these things, and why are we not bringing charges? Um, and it is not the people who are involved need to be held accountable. There are so many witnesses still that can, there is so much that they can use to hold these people accountable. It's just a choice not to. And it is not enough for, some of these people who have had to resign from their different positions or whatever. That's not accountability. It's not enough to just have the information out there and for these people to be publicly shamed. Um, there need to be criminal charges. Um, you know, and a lot of these people who had to step down from their positions, a lot of them were. It, it is so there is so much more that needs to be done. That is not accountability in my mind. And obviously the Department of Justice is choosing not to do anything with this. That is something, that like Congress needs to step in and require use their oversight powers to hold the Department of Justice accountable, make sure they are actually doing their jobs. And they can also, there are state courts or state prosecutors who can do some of this work if the Department of Justice is not willing to do it. So we can make referrals to state courts or state prosecutors. Um, but yeah, there needs to be so much more.
100%. We're coming up on, and it's actually tomorrow, is the 1 year anniversary of the death of Virginia Giuffre. Tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary of that, April 25th. And I actually share the same birthday as Virginia. Mine is also August 9th. I am a very proud Leo. But we share the same birthday. So obviously it comes with a lot of different emotions. Virginia was very outspoken and was one of the most prominent accusers and survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. And coming forward about a quote unquote powerful person, or specifically a powerful man that literally had so many connections worldwide. This is not just a United States thing. We've also seen it, Israel. We've also seen it in the UK. We saw his connections like rampantly, like everywhere. And the thing about it is there are more people like Jeffrey Epstein that are still alive, that are
Yeah.
still on our streets, that are in our schools, that are in God, viewing this website that was recently exposed
Oh,
and
yeah.
like millions of views to this website that's being deemed as quote unquote like a rape academy.
Yeah.
And it's deeply concerning. And then you also have AI being unregulated. Grok AI on, Elon Musk and on Twitter slash X. You
Mm,
can go in and you can say, oh, undress this woman.
mm.
That's so concerning.
Yeah.
So that brings me into like my next talking point is thinking about like the AI data centers.
Hmm.
We were talking earlier about like price gouging, we're talking about affordability. One of the things that continues to run rampant across the country is these AI data centers. And a
Hmm.
lot of local concerns are the debt or the water usage, the
Yeah.
electricity. More specifically, like Texas. Texas is not a part of the national power grid.
Hmm.
It's already failed whenever the weather is
Yeah.
freezing.
Hmm.
Not for Ted Cruz. He decided to flee the state and go to Cancun and leave his constituents.
Hmm.
That's a different conversation, though, right? That they're not ready to have. But thinking about like regulating AI,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on this? Because if AI was actually used in the way it was actually supposed to do, we wouldn't have a lot of these issues. But there's no accountability. There's no
Right.
transparency. There's literally no guardrails on this. So
Hmm.
curious to know what your thoughts are about regulating AI and what you would propose should you be elected to Congress. What would you support as far as regulating AI?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, AI is one of those things that I think it is here to stay. It is whether we like it or not, it is a part of it is going to be a part of our culture, our society, um, our lives from here on out. And so we need to find ways to deal with it. It does need to be regulated. There is so much abuse out there. I mean, as far as the information, those types of things, AI is getting to the point where um, it's hard to tell sometimes what is real or not anymore. And so there needs to be guardrails on that because, you can only imagine like the where that could lead as far as who could be hurt because of that. Um, as and then not to mention also just what it's going to do with to our workforce. It's so many different areas of our lives that it's affecting. And then you have the data centers to run the AI. Use just one small like one small task that AI task uses up so much more data and energy than so many things that we used to do with our computers. And so the massive amounts of resources, that we are going through. So and with these data centers, we're also finding that they're being built in areas where again, we're not building them in like Manhattan, they're being
Right.
built in these little rural areas where the people are desperate, who, they are just looking for some revenue. And these companies are coming in and taking advantage of people.
Mhm.
Talking these areas, these communities into not only letting them in, but providing these companies with tax breaks to come in, and then and incentives, and then they are they're overextending their power grids, they're using up their water, and sure, they get a little bit of some jobs when these data centers are created, but after they're created, those jobs, for the most part, go away. Most of these data centers run themselves. Um, and so, we also need protections for for these areas that these data centers are going into. Um, and making sure that, our communities are not being taken advantage of, making sure that, that it's fair.
Yeah, 100%. And it's very real concerns that we're hearing from these communities. And you're right. It's not being built in Manhattan. It's not being built in like these bigger cities. I mean, they do exist, but majority of them are being built in areas that are impoverished, that are disproportionately affected by climate change. I'm
Hmm.
thinking about Memphis, Tennessee is a really big concern of mine. My co-founder is based in Tennessee. She lives in Nashville, and just seeing the health concerns around these data centers too, like
Yes.
emissions and like
Yes.
there's so many problems with this, and just there's a lot that goes into it. But I want to pivot a little bit because there's a lot more that goes into this. So post Roe v. Wade,
Hmm.
you know, allegedly this was supposed to leave abortion rights up to the states, but we see what happens whenever it's left up to the states. Florida has a 6 week abortion ban.
Yeah.
I know reproductive rights is a really, really big thing to you. So I would love for you to kind of share about the state of reproductive rights, like not just in Florida, but across the country. You know, they did not codify Roe v. Wade
Hmm.
into the US Constitution. They did have many, many chances
Hmm.
whenever Dems took over all three branches of government. This was not a big focus, and it absolutely should have been. This should be front and center because abortion rights is human rights. Human rights are literally as it states as abortion rights, or is human rights.
Hmm.
And thinking about the current state of abortion rights and the 6 week abortion ban, can you talk a little bit about how this has impacted the state of Florida and in your district?
Hmm. Yeah. So, and here in Florida, um, there are so many. I've heard, all these anecdotal stories about all these, so many women who now have to travel out of state in order to, and sometimes very far, um, across several states in order to get care. Um, and and then there are also all of these organizations that are preying on a lot of these women as well. Again, in some of these poor or rural communities that um, don't have hospitals or medical centers, um, we hear stories of these pro-life organizations coming in and pretending to offer medical services, prenatal care, and really just preying on these women who don't really have any other choice. Um, and it is just we did try to get that 6 week abortion ban changed, with a constitutional amendment in 2024. We got very close. Um, but it failed, and now it seems like, I talked to some of the groups who spearheaded that last time. You
Mhm.
know, the Florida legislature has made it so difficult to get an amendment on the ballot now that a lot of these groups are just, it's not being done again in 2026. They're like, maybe we can try again in 2028. Um, but it's too hard. Um, and so yeah, I mean there are a lot of people in that pro-choice, a lot of pro-choice advocates who are just very discouraged right now.
Yep, and rightfully so, because like you said, they make it extremely hard to do this, even though abortion is a winning issue. We saw candidates running pro-choice campaigns across the country, and they're winning in landslide elections
Yeah.
because it's a human right,
Hmm.
and the right to choose is incredibly important. Do
Absolutely.
mind your own damn uterus is what I always tell people in our comment sections. Having almost 400,000 followers, we hear a lot of things. We tend to go viral sometimes with our post. And the people that are in our comments are the exact reason the Department of Education needs to continue existing. And I'll be the first to say that. Fully funding public education is a big thing with me. And you know, but thinking about integrity and bringing integrity into politics, but more importantly, electing people that understand that integrity, honesty, accountability, and transparency are keys of any good elected official or any leader. What do these words mean to you? Because they're more than just words.
Yeah.
But what do these mean to have leaders that exemplify these characteristics?
Yeah. I mean, so this should be public service, you know. Um, when you are elected, it you shouldn't be going there to make money, to gather to power, to gain those connections so that you can enrich you or your family later. Um, you're not there to become a celebrity. It's not
Mm,
there. You're not there to just have your ego stroked. And so many people, um, and so one of the cores of my campaign is accountability
mm,
and making sure that we do create these guardrails, so that we can have a government that serves people and not just the rich and the powerful and the well-connected. Um, and I think it's because I think I'm not saying that most people who go into politics necessarily do it for any nefarious reason. I think a lot of times people do go into it for the right reasons. Um, and then there are temptations, there are so many, and it's so easy sometimes to talk yourself into believing that you are doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. Um, and, that's why we need these guardrails. That's why we need to have term limits. That's why we need to overturn Citizens United and get corporate money out of politics, ban stock trading in Congress, um, enact a moratorium on lobbying after um, a member leaves office. So they're not cashing in and using those connections to their advantage afterwards. All of these things will just reduce the ability for people in power to um, to fall prey to those temptations. So that, we can have elected officials who are just there to serve.
And it leads to the question of who are they serving? Are you going to
Right,
sell your
right,
soul to a
right.
corporation? Are you going to sell your soul to APAC? Are you going to sell your soul to this corporate trickle down capitalistic, like, oh, we can dive into this, but I know we're
Yeah.
coming up on time shortly. But um, yes, exactly. And you said a key thing about ending Citizens United.
Hmm.
I have concerns about how we get there,
Hmm.
right? Because we know the Supreme Court's going to put the brakes on like literally everything that we try to do. Because there's a
Hmm.
6-3 majority.
Hmm.
And thinking about that, what are some of those steps that we can take? And I call this like the big buyout essentially, because that's pretty much what it was. Like it's a mass buying of politicians because this money, this has such influence. A lot of elected officials do not know what is in some of the bills that they are pushing because they're written by third parties. I did not believe this until I went and tried to talk to a legislator. I fully believe it now and I understand it. I understand it's a deep issue. They don't even know what's in these bills. They haven't
Yeah.
read it. They
Hmm.
didn't write it. They don't know anything that's in it, but they're money
Right.
because we know that money talks, bullshit walks.
Yeah.
Like it's very real. But what are some of those steps that we can take, in your opinion, to get to ending Citizens United? Because there are steps that we can do and little things that we can do. And again, these are just policy decisions. What are some of those things we can do as far as getting big money out of politics and overturning Citizens United?
Yeah. I mean, with Citizens United being, it's a Supreme Court case,
Mhm.
based on constitutional grounds. We are, I guess, when we say overturn Citizens United, I mean, we truly would either need to have a new, have it heard again by the Supreme Court and have it overturned on different, or there would have to be a constitutional amendment, which is very difficult. Um, but Congress can attempt to put in other guardrails that are, maybe not 100%, the same as actually getting an amendment. One of the things that one really interesting proposal that I saw was, um, removing corporations' power um, to donate money to so I guess redefining what what a corporation is and what a corporation can, what types of, where its money can go, but in a different, so I guess trying to attack it from that end. Um, so, um, but yeah, trying to put in, I mean, ultimately, just trying to, yeah, try to limit, I guess, the types of things that, like the
In-
types,
Influence the
yeah.
campaigns and limit the influence and limit, there's obviously like campaign spending limits that could happen.
Mhm.
There's, they already cap for federal elections, the $3,500 like contribution limit, right? For
Mhm.
like any like person or like corporation, etc. There should also be campaign spending limits. There's different things that we can do. Obviously, it costs money for like mailers and like things like that. But there's so many different things that we can do to have these fair and just elections, and
Right.
there's steps we can take to get there.
Right. Well, right. Like with transparency,
Mhm.
making sure that when these corporations do donate, that we know where it's going. All the talk about dark money, um, making making all of those donations public and transparent so that people can see exactly where all that money is going and how it's being spent.
Yeah, exactly. And it leads to my last question for you, obviously, then how people can like follow you and be like contribute to your campaign because it's very expensive to run for office. It's very expensive,
Yes.
especially in like very different areas. I'm learning that as I talk to candidates, just seeing like what they've been experiencing. But do you feel the current leadership of both chambers at the present moment? So, you have Chuck Schumer, you have Hakeem Jeffries, leading the Democratic Party in both chambers, right? There's speakers and or not speaker, but their party leadership. Do you feel that they are meeting the current moment? Do you feel that they are leading us in the correct direction? Why or why not?
I don't. I am not a fan of what Schumer and Jeffries, the way that they have been handling the Trump administration over this last, I guess, year and a half
It
now.
feels like an eternity, but yes.
Yes. It's like it hasn't even been a year and a half. Um, but yeah, I feel like there have been so many times when they could have pushed back more and they chose not to. I am so frustrated by really just the excuses, and yeah, just that, oh, well, we're in the minority, we don't have enough votes to pass certain things. And I feel like there are times when they should put things up for a vote anyways. Even if they know it's not going to pass, just putting it up for a vote will at least let the public know that these are important issues that they need to fight for, you know. Um, and it gets the other side on the record. So we know exactly which representatives are voting against their constituents' interests. There is value in fighting even when you know there's no hope of winning. Um, so I have just been so frustrated over this last year. Um, yeah,
And don't forget about Cory book tour. Going on a book tour. Like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Why? Why are you going on a book tour? We need you
yeah.
in the Senate using your voice to fight for people. What the hell are you doing? You're going on a book tour. What in the actual hell are you doing? This is not meeting the moment. This is not leadership. This is not using your platform to elevate the issues that are affecting his constituents, but all of us. Because no matter what district you represent, your decisions impact all of us across this entire country. Those decisions leave lasting impacts. And if it's a disastrous bill, you vote for a disastrous bill, it's going to have disastrous consequences. You're going to lose your reelection. Like
Mhm.
a book tour is not going to save your reelection bid. Just saying. But thinking about that, I've been frustrated too. And there was a point in time where I said I wanted to run for office, but I am not going to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my platform to elevate candidates like yourself and then other candidates that are running some very impressive campaigns. Very, very impressive campaigns. They are fighting like hell to get elected. And they're struggling because mainstream media is not picking up on their race. They're highlighting the current incumbents. I do feel a little bit of sense of hope that a lot of current incumbents do have challengers in districts all across the country. I feel that on both sides of the aisle. It's really good to see. Some, dinos and rhinos are getting knocked out of their elections. They're losing their election bids. So it does give me a little bit of sense of hope, and that's what we call democracy. Now, how can people contribute to your campaign? And I tell all the candidates, and I'll tell you that your website, your donation link and your social media handles are going to be in the description of this podcast episode so people can find you there. But how can people contribute to your campaign and what is needed the most right now for you?
Yeah. So my website is yenbaileyforcongress.com. So you can go there and there you can donate through my website. You know, there's a link to my Act Blue, or you can just go directly to Act Blue and donate there. So yes, fundraising is has definitely been the most difficult part of the campaign for me. Um, we do not get help. A lot of people are always like, "Oh, well, is the party helping you at all?" And it's like, "No, no, they are not." Unless you are in a swing district, the party's not interested at all. Um, and even if you are, there are certain types of candidates that the party usually favors. Um, and these establishment candidates that everyone talks about. So yeah, fundraising is definitely it's huge, and it is very hard as a grassroots candidate. So that definitely helps. Um, if you're in district, of course, volunteering, but you can still volunteer even out of district. We have a lot of volunteers from all over the country who help us with things like call time, research, social media. We have even a group of artists who have helped, create graphics and those types of things. Yeah, which is awesome. And one big thing that is very easy is just boosting our social media. So subscribing, liking, or following, sharing posts, commenting, all of those things help spread the word.
Absolutely. Excuse my yawning, y'all. It's been a long week. Thank God it's Friday. TGIF.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I greatly appreciate you, and I look forward to continuing to watch your campaign and uplifting you as much as we can. And with that, please take care of yourself out there. Make sure you stay hydrated. Stay hydrated. I saw, we were talking before we started recording. I saw
Giant
your
water bottle.
big, yes, your big water bottle. So
Yes.
make sure you stay hydrated and, good luck. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. I'll see you out there. Okay.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Take care of yourself. Okay.
Thank you, you too.